he had wanted to join NATO way back when. So it's like, he wanted to be at the cool kids table, and Bill Clinton, who seemed like he was one of the cool kids, told him, yeah, maybe it'll happen. Let's take a look at this clip.
At a meeting here in the Kremlin with the outgoing President Bill Clinton, right here in the next room, I said to him, I asked him, Bill, do you think if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think it would happen? Suddenly he said, it's interesting. I think so. But in the evening, when we met for dinner, he said, I've talked to my team. No, it's not possible now. You can ask him. I think he will watch our interview. He'll confirm it. I wouldn't have said anything like that if it hadn't happened. Okay.
Were you sincere?
It's impossible now.
Would you have joined NATO?
Look, I asked the question, is it possible or not? And the answer I got was no. If I was insincere in my desire to find out what the leadership position was...
But if he had said yes, would you have joined NATO?
If he had said yes, the process of rapprochement would have commenced, and eventually it might have happened if we had seen some sincere wish on the other side of our partners.
That's kind of fascinating, right? I mean, is that not absolutely fascinating? Was Bill Clinton just sort of talking? Hey, we're hanging out. Let me start this off right. I could see him doing that, and then being like, hey, yeah, no, I talked to everybody. It's no can do. I mean, part of the point that he's making is that the leadership doesn't even matter. It's the infrastructure around the leadership that matters. And the reason why it matters so much is because there's sort of a group think. I mean, this is the so-called deep state, right, that people worry about. But, the president comes and goes, and the president certainly sets the tone for sure, and a lot of the policy tone for sure. But ultimately, when you think about our relationships with all of these foreign leaders and these foreign countries, a lot of that's already baked in. And so you can imagine how those people in that infrastructure felt when Donald Trump came into town and suddenly was like, yeah, I'm ripping this Iran deal up. You guys spent 8 years on this thing and it's gone. Well, a lot of people were upset. Like, they'd pulled all-nighters working on that Iran deal. They thought that this was the path forward, and all of a sudden, who is this two-bit nothing to come in here and tell us we have to tear this whole thing up? Well, they did not like that. They didn't like it. Iran didn't like that. Iran's like, well, how are we ever going to trust the U.S. again? Because, you have one president who does one thing and another president who does another thing. That's a valid concern. I mean, it's Iran, however, so I would just, remember that one. And I think that Vladimir Putin has felt a little bit of this whiplash, and he feels as though it's not the leader that matters, but it's the groupthink within the so-called deep state, the State Department, the intelligence operations, etc. I'm not making any excuses for him, by the way. It's just that for whatever reason, we have not been able to quite figure this out. And it's shameful that we're now in a situation where we are losing, I don't mean we specifically, it potentially could be we, but the world is losing lives over there in Ukraine with soldiers being killed. And this is just to kind of give it some reference. It's sort of like Texas, right? Can you imagine if like all of a sudden Texas is a war zone? These days, sometimes it feels like it could be, right? I mean, with everything that's been happening with the border, but it's hard for the people of Russia, many of whom have relatives that have lived there or do live there in Ukraine. And so this is a very surreal kind of moment and devastating that we're in this.